Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. It's episode 2564 of The Tom Woods Show, and I'm delighted to be joined once again by Kevin Dolan, whom I just spent last weekend with in Boston. Kevin is the founder of Exit, which you can find at exitgroup.us, which is, I guess I would describe it, and you can fill in any blanks or correct any errors, but as a kind of a fraternity in which the men involved are seeking to better themselves in one way or another, improve their, if not job prospects, then their entrepreneurial, the likelihood of their entrepreneurial successes, and to build kind of sovereignty and independence for themselves and their families, so they're not so wedded to the man, quote unquote. But that does not mean necessarily that they're going off grid and they're going to live in the woods and hunt for their sustenance. It doesn't have to mean that. It just means that you can make a living regardless of what Anthony Fauci says, that kind of thing. So welcome, Kevin. Welcome back to the show.
It's great to be here. And that's a great sum up. It's basically, we want to be aspirational, successful, sovereign, so that we can have grandkids.
Yes, indeed. And Kevin is also the director of the Accountability Groups program at my Tom Woods School of Life. And we've done a lot of great things for a lot of people there. OneBuckTrial.com is how you can give that a try. So let's talk about your big project these days. And we'll talk about the concerns that you have that led you to do something like this. Because I'm telling you, putting on an event, people, is vastly more difficult logistically and takes a lot more out of you than you think and costs more. Like every aspect of it is worse than you thought it would be when you took the project on. So Kevin in particular is running NatalCon, which is a natalist convention, a conference that is seeking to try to come up with solutions to the problem of falling birth rates. And this is not a problem that's exclusive to the Western world. We see this in many other places too. Now, Kevin, not all that long ago, and in fact, in some circles, we still hear it, we were told that the real problem was the quote-unquote population bomb that was about to explode. And the population of the Earth would outpace its resources, and a Malthusian catastrophe was bound to occur. That has spectacularly failed to come to pass. Do you have any thoughts about why?
Well, so it's both failed in the sense that the population growth did not lead to the resource catastrophe that they were anticipating. Despite the fact that population continued to grow, the sort of basic inputs, basically Paul Ehrlich, who was the author of the population bomb, had this bet. And he made this bet. I can't remember who he made the bet with, who was on the other
Julian
side.
Simon.
Basically. There you go, thank you. Who it was a bet on various raw materials. They would get more expensive as the population increased, and instead the price of all those goods declined. And so that's one side of it. And then the other side of it was that the sort of acceleration or the continuation of that trend line of population growth just flattened, and now it's starting to dip down. So both in terms of the growth didn't have the negative consequences that they expected, and the growth did not continue. And so now we're in a situation where the consequences of degrowth are what we're dealing with. And China's probably the most aggressive, serious example of this, where they had the one-child policy for many, many years, and that has led to a situation where it's not obvious that they're going to have young people to fight their wars or to buy the houses that form the basis of all their sort of retirees' investment portfolios, because they're pretty restrictive on how capital can leave China. So it sort of forces all kinds of money into these giant real estate projects that end up being kind of ghost towns. And that would be a problem all by itself, even without the demographic issue. But now that it's like the population is flatlining and beginning to decline, with the housing crisis in 2008, it was like essentially the population and the demand had to catch up with the supply of housing, right? There was an oversupply, but it could eventually sort of get burned down and corrected in terms of people buying those houses. This is a situation where that will never occur. Essentially, the value of this real estate and the value of the money that went into it, all that goes to zero because there will never be enough Chinese people to live in those houses. And so that's just one example of it. You're seeing similar things happening in Japan. Probably the longest running population decline scenario, which we see in Japan, is one where like the lost decade that some people have heard of in terms of the Japanese economy flatlining. You could attribute almost all of that to their demographic problem, the fact that they're aging and the economic dynamism that comes with having young people in the economy. But also, I would argue that the Japanese sort of have the best case scenario where they're highly developed, they're highly homogenous, they're highly automated. And so they're able to handle the consequences much, much better than other places that are about to go through this, like Mexico, like Brazil, like Nepal, even. Like basically, it's all over the world. It's not just rich countries. It's not just Western countries. It's essentially everywhere. And so we wanted to get people together, primarily, academics and people involved in investment and thought leaders, to sort of find the contours of this problem, figure out to what extent could it be addressable by policy, but to what extent is it sort of a baked-in problem, a terrain problem that we're going to have to deal with, and then how do we deal with it? So, like, for instance, we know exactly how many 15-year-olds there will be in 10 years because they're 5 now. And we can't make any more 5-year-olds. We have the number of 5-year-olds we're going to have. And so this is a problem that it's a fascinating problem because the political system and the economic system is built on these sort of quarter to quarter, election cycle to election cycle patterns where politicians are accountable. And there's no way to hold a politician in America accountable for something that's going to happen in 20 years. And so this is something that our system is just not built to address. But at the same time, it's so obvious. We can see, any normal person, any thinking person can totally see this problem coming. And so it makes it a really interesting opportunity to find, I guess what I would call arbitrage, like basically money kind of lying on the ground where there's investment opportunities, there's ways to prepare that the larger economy is not going to pick up on that, but that individuals and families and communities could potentially pick up on. And so that's kind of what we're looking for from this conference is what are the opportunities we have to make the problem better? And then what are some opportunities we have, given that some of this is sort of already baked into the cake, how can we respond to it to make our communities, our families, our financial situation sort of more robust to it?
So I want to make sure everybody understands we won't spend most of our time talking about logistical aspects about the conference itself, but we're talking about the themes related to it. But all the same, when and where is this taking place, first of all?
So it's March 28th and 29th here in Austin, Texas.
2025. Okay. Austin, Texas. Now,
That's
you had, you got a little bit of a boost when Elon Musk tweeted out the welcome talk that you gave to the assembled folks at the previous conference. And what was interesting about his posting that was he wasn't retweeting your talk. He posted it and tweeted it out, which I think is more significant.
Yeah, it was an incredible day. Basically, he tweeted or posted, they're posts now. He posted my 10-minute opening address where I sort of laid out the structure of the problem and the medical side of it, the dating side of it, why people aren't getting married, why married couples are having fewer children, et cetera, et cetera. And I think he said basically, if this problem is not solved, human civilization will end. And I essentially believe that's true. I think if you look at cities like Detroit, they're an example of what happens to infrastructure, what happens to real estate markets, what happens to sort of the overall picture of investment and like investor sentiment that happens under conditions of degrowth. And so we're sort of looking at a situation where, like, I guess the silver lining is you can get a house in Detroit for like $1. So maybe that's good news, but most of those houses kind of have to be bulldozed because they're the kinds of buildings that we build, the kinds of capital that we produce in a modern sort of technological economy. It's not durable capital. It rots if you don't use it. And so anyway, so Elon posted the speech, and we got tons of attention from that. Tons of people, demographers, social scientists who were interested in participating. So this next conference is going to be much more focused on how can we study this problem in a rigorous way that is not polemical or political, that it's like, let's get a careful grip on the data and let's study this problem very carefully, so that because this is the kind of issue that could, if you were not careful, just have everybody comes with their sort of preloaded political response to it. Like, well, we need more, programs, or we need to get, it's all about my thing. And you just need to give more money to my thing, and that'll solve this demographic problem. But we want to look at it a lot more carefully than that. And one of the things I loved about the last year's conference was that it was kind of this audience of tech people who were sort of in the kind of Elon camp, where they're not unfriendly to Christianity, but that's not their world. And then you had like the more traditional Catholic, Latter-day Saint, Jewish, Protestant tribe there. And what was great about it was that there was a lot of humility around this issue. Like it wasn't like, hey, I've got it all figured out and everybody needs to get in line behind me. It was very much like, we're all in the soup together. This is a huge problem. It's bigger than any of us. How can we get together to solve it? And so basically this next conference is going to be taking that same energy of curiosity and humility and applying some more kind of academic rigor to it, and hopefully coming out with proposals that can, be taken to some of the big picture investors on this issue, the people who have money and have manifested concern about this issue, and see if we can get them to fund some projects. So that's sort of the goal to come away with.
And I think this is what I find most appealing about what you're doing, because we can't even count how many conferences are held and how much money is spent on them every year, whose purpose seems to be to make everybody feel great and stand up and clap and buy a t-shirt and go home, and then nothing gets done. I'm guilty of that. I've given plenty of rah-rah speeches in my day, and that has its place, because sometimes people are demoralized and they need to be boosted. But I think, we have YouTube now, and you can find, I have some great speeches on there that'll get you, raring to go to do good things. But now it's time to do the good things. And it's great that this is not a conference where it's going to be one speaker after another lamenting the problem or talking about how much they love babies. And then you go home and again, nothing gets done. The idea of this is we're going to think through what some possible approaches to this might be, so that at the end of the conference, we're smarter and better positioned to cope with this problem than we were at the beginning. I mean, that seems so obvious, Kevin, but yet so few conferences are like that.
I think that's true. And I think the magnitude of this issue, to some extent it helps, and to some extent it hurts, because you have to sort of wake people up to the magnitude of the consequences of what's coming because of this issue. And then you have to say, now let's go start families. And like you're at the same time saying, like, this is going to be a really difficult, challenging bottleneck for everybody to pass through, but it's worth passing through it. That there's a lot of potential and a lot of opportunity and a lot of possibility on the other side. And so, keeping it optimistic and action oriented has been something that I've put a lot of thought into.
Tom Woods Show listeners, I know you recognize the importance of sound money, and I know a lot of you are interested in Bitcoin. And you may have heard the expression, not your keys, not your coins. So a lot of you have your Bitcoin on an exchange, and I know you need to get it off that exchange, but you don't know how to do it. It seems like something only techies would know. You don't know where to start. Now, with enough time and dedication, anyone can learn to properly take their Bitcoin into self-custody. But stuck on this fiat treadmill, a lot of people just don't have the spare hours at the end of the day to figure it all out. Well, Bitcoin Mentor is a personalized one-on-one education and Bitcoin consultancy service founded by the best in Bitcoin education, BTC Sessions, Mr. Ben Perrin. So whether you're a beginner or a longtime hodler looking to upgrade, and sorry, I cannot say hodler, that just doesn't sound right to me, Bitcoin Mentor can guide you through self-custody, running a node, home mining, multi-sig setup, even inheritance planning. Leaving Bitcoin on an exchange risks losing everything gained to a hack, bankruptcy, or 6102 attack. Their team of mentors will work with you based on your specific needs to get you to the point where you can sleep easy at night knowing your money is secured and in your control. Visit bitcoinmentor.io/woods for special discounted offers for Tom Woods listeners. That's bitcoinmentor.io/woods. I want to push you a little bit on one thing that we talked about last time you were here. And it has to do with precisely this problem of we're not exactly sure where the problem is coming from. Now, there are some very glib and easy answers that you can give. You can very easily say, oh, it's a cultural shift, or people aren't as religious as they used to be, and that's the cause of the problem. And I would love to have that be the answer because that's simple and I can wrap my head around it. On the other hand, I don't want that to be the answer because that's hard to repair. You can't tell people, be religious, so that actually would be a little bit of a challenge, but at least it would be, we could identify it, we would know where this was coming from, but it's not obvious that that's the whole story. It could be a significant piece of the story, but it doesn't account for why this is happening in a bunch of places that have completely different levels of religiosity, completely different cultures. Why does this seem to go beyond? Why is this a persistent problem even across heterogeneous groupings of that kind? But then another explanation could be that it's very expensive to raise kids more and more these days. But yet even that's not satisfying because it's nowhere near as expensive as it was, let's say, 500 years ago, when no modern comfort was available to you at any price. So that can't be the answer. So as the guy running NatalCon, obviously you think about this a lot. Yeah. Are you beginning to hone in on what the core interlocking explanations might be?
Yeah. So if you think it's about it being too expensive, you have to explain the fertility rates in Uganda. And if you think it's about we don't have enough social programs, then you have to explain fertility rates in Denmark and Sweden and Norway and Iceland. And if you think it's about we don't have enough socially conservative policy and culture, then you have to explain how fertility is so very low in Japan and South Korea, where, it's sort of a social conservative's dream in many cases about sort of what policies you'd want. And what culture you'd want, and even the homogeneity. So there's none of those answers, even if they're a partial explanation for certain situations, they're not dispositive of the whole problem. They don't explain it. And so what we have to look at is there some meta circumstance that applies to all these situations? And I think, sorry if you're getting some background noise. Hang on a second.
Okay. It's not being picked up from what I can hear.
Okay.
And by the way, as long as we're off the air, the word I was looking for was transcend. The problem transcends all these other things. And I just thought if I stammer long enough, that word will come to me, and it did not. All right. Let's go back in. Actually, I don't know, Chris, maybe we keep that part. Why don't we keep that part? So people will know that in the back of Woods' mind, transcend was sitting there. All right, go ahead, Kevin.
Well, so in my view, I think a lot of the attempts at solving this problem it's a bit like, well, the pandas aren't breeding. And so like, what if we just gave them some more kibble? Like maybe they just need some more kibble to breed. And it's like, that's not really the panda's problem. The panda's problem is that you've done something really disruptive and unnatural to their way of living. And I think that all of us, and again, this is just my theory. I don't think everybody who comes to the conference has to share this theory. But my explanation is that it's essentially a matter of habitat degradation. That most human beings alive today are living in profoundly unnatural conditions, and also profoundly constrained and unfree conditions. Space that is owned by someone else, space that you are not meaningfully in control of, and so you look at like something like the baby boom. Right? The baby boom is this really interesting puzzle because actually fertility rates were declining through the beginning of the 20th century. Like it's not this like post-60s, post-pill, post-sexual revolution thing. It had been going on for a while. And the baby boom was this outlier, this reversion of that trend for a bit. And what's interesting about the baby boom is that it actually happened during the war. It wasn't like, the GIs came home and we had a big party and we had a bunch of babies. Baby boom was happening during World War II. And the best I can figure, the best explanation I can come up with for that is that essentially it was a condition that was between men and women. They were much more, not forced, but the conditions encouraged people to return to more natural forms of relationship between men and women. And the fact that the men were all going off to fight, and the women were sort of manning the home front, that there was something very primal and very familiar about that allowed us to be, frankly, more appealing to each other. And the idea of family being more appealing and sort of mortality salience and like, where are we all going? What does it all mean? Because it could end at any moment. Like, and you find that the baby boom, it happened in countries that were devastated by the war. It also happened in countries like the US that were, and not to say profited from the war, but weren't devastated by the war. And so, the best I can figure on that front is that there is something, I would call it, you could call it, if you didn't want to say spiritual, you could say psychological in a very complex way, that defines the conditions under which human beings actually want to raise families. And it's you sort of see this, like the more complex a creature is, the more complex an animal is, the more sensitive it tends to be to these kinds of disruptions in its environment. And we are, in many ways, the most complex form of life. And so, we are very sensitive. And also, I think, and this is a point that I think gets missed in a lot of like the population bomb and the sort of doomer, the liberal, frankly, attitude toward children, which is that like human life is beautiful and it's like at least as interesting and desirable to have around and aesthetically beautiful as like a Siberian tiger or any other endangered species. And so like my approach to this is basically conservationism. Like how do we get this creature, this beautiful thing, into a more natural environment so that it can flourish? And that's so anyway, that's sort of maybe a little bit more poetry and less like hard, like brass tacks than you wanted. But I don't know that there is like a brass tacks explanation yet. And that's kind of what I want to get done at this conference is see if we can take some of these hypotheses that explain this very complex and confusing problem, and see if we can put a little bit more numbers to it.
Hey everybody, let's take a minute to thank our sponsor, Persist SEO. If you're getting buried by your competition online, then build your brand, your reputation, and your lead flow with digital marketing by Persist SEO. If you're a small local business trying to compete against large companies in the service industry, then increase your visibility with Persist SEO. What if you have low or no leads coming in on a consistent basis? Well, then website search engine and conversion optimization can help move the needle to a more prosperous business model for you. Are you tired of cold calling and networking? Use your website as a lead generation engine. What if you're not showing up for your services in the search engines? Well, get found with Persist SEO Expert Search Engine Optimization. All you have to do is call 770-580-3736 or visit them at ineedseo.help for a free website audit and consultation. That's 770-580-3736 or ineedseo.help. Do you happen to know what historians customarily say about the baby boom and how they account for it?
I mean, in general, I think it is this sort of received wisdom of the post-war abundance that there was, it was easy to get a job, it was easy to get a house, it was, we were sort of the only game in town as far as global manufacturing, that thesis is complicated in at least two ways. Number one is it doesn't explain why China can't get their people to have kids, and the baby boom predates that abundance. It predates. I mean, it was happening while we were sort of rationing fires and food and everything else. Like it was not. It was maybe economic stability, but not economic abundance in the war years.
What was the thing that made you, maybe the fact, the trend, the article you read? What was the thing that made you say, I have to make the problem of declining births into a central part of what I do?
Well, it actually was something that we started working on it before we knew that was what we were working on, actually. I would frame exit as the how and natalism as the why. So it was me and a bunch of my friends getting together because we knew we wanted to be more sovereign, and we knew we didn't want to be dependent on these systems that were failing. And it was actually my co-founder Drew who asked me, like, okay, so we've got these guys, we're trying to be more independent, more sovereign, but like sovereign to do what? Like what does that mean? Like, why do we care about this? And because we could sort of identify that there were other groups and other people who wanted to be independent in other ways, but that we knew intuitively, instinctively were like not our people, not on side with us. And we started thinking like, well, so what? What are we aiming at? How do we know if we're winning? And he goes, is it babies? Like the more babies we have. And I said, nah, that doesn't seem right. I think it's grandbabies. Because if you have grandkids, then you've completed the life cycle. You've gone through a full loop of the process. And, there's so many psychological loops that close when you have kids, and you get to see yourself, in another person and care deeply about them and watch them grow up and then have their own situation and see that unfold and transpire. And basically we realized that because we'd all been like running our mouths on the internet and like risking our jobs, and in my case, losing my job, to voice these opinions. And I thought, I'm not generally a terribly irresponsible person. Why did it seem so important to me to be able to say these things? And I thought, well, if I can't say these things, if we can't resist this system, if we can't get outside this system, then everything that I care about is going to be lost. Everything I care about is going to be sterilized. That I'm not going to have grandkids. or if I do have grandkids, they're not gonna believe any of the same things I believe. Like they're going to be a completely different kind of creature living in a totally different system that I find repugnant. And so it was like, oh, that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for this problem. And so when I look at the issue of demographic decline, I see basically it's like Kyle Reese versus Skynet in Terminator. It's man versus the machines. And there's this growing monoculture that is anti-human, anti-life, that does not care about us, and we have to get outside of it and build something else. And so natalism became sort of the banner around which we recognize we had already sort of been gathering.
So that's why I'm very much in support of what you're doing at Exit. Exitgroup.us is the website. It is now, Kevin's group is a fraternity. It's men only. I have a, being Woods and being, slightly more to the left of Kevin, I have a more inclusive group, but exitgroup.us is for ambitious people, especially, I would say of any age, but I would imagine people who kind of think of themselves as young professionals and who are navigating really, really difficult territory in the corporate world, or even just in this world in general, with price inflation and a crazy culture, and feeling like there's a gun at their heads everywhere they turn. Every institution they look at has its sights on them. So to be in a group of like-minded people in a similar situation, there's no way that's not going to help you.
That's right. And and in particular, our group is, it tends to be largely, it's a lot of guys who have started their families, and it's sort of like, there's a lot of millennials who will say, like, because they got married and were able to start a family, and they've watched as the dating market has gotten just so much more adversarial and difficult, who kind of feel like they caught the last chopper out of Nam. And a lot of these guys are going like, oh, I have kids, I have a wife, that's all really good. But I'm realizing that, like, what the heck are my kids going to do? Like, my battle's not over at all, not remotely. So, like, how am I going to get my kids ready to find the right person, be the right person, support a family under these conditions that are so much more difficult than we grew up with, which were in turn so much more difficult than what our parents had to deal with. Like, the difficulty level just keeps going up. And so it's about how do we kind of mob up and work together to make that problem better. So we start businesses. We've got guys doing like homeschool co-ops and preparedness collectives, and like basically just sort of you want to know who you can count on, both in the event of, like, a big picture thing like a disaster, but also just like, who do I want my kids to grow up around? Like, who do I want to be their mentors and their the boys and girls they date, and like how can I make sure that is as healthy as possible in a really sort of damaged and polluted environment. So that's what we're working on.
Now, I want to clarify something I said before. It's not that I'm saying there's no room for having an event that's like a pep rally. Because, there is need to buck up our courage sometimes and to have that kind of fellowship. And I absolutely do believe that we should preach to the choir. The choir needs to be preached to. There is no church on earth that says, well, the sermon is coming, so the choir is dismissed. I've never seen a church like that. The choir stays and listens, because it also needs to be educated, and it needs to be encouraged, and it needs to be reminded that it's not alone. So I'm all for that. Why else would I have done my 2000th episode? Good grief, did that cost me a fortune? But I did it because it was a good thing, right? I made no money off that. It was free. It was all red. I was all in the red for that. But I did that because I owed it. I felt like to my supporters. But likewise, there's also nothing wrong with educational work. I mean, of course, I work for, I helped to create ronpaulhomeschool.com. That's very important for our families. I have libertyclassroom.com that goes back 12 years now. I am not in any way unhappy with those things. I'm very proud of them.
Yeah.
Our problem on, let's say, our side of things is that that's usually where we would have left it. Whereas the other side is organizing, or they're doing something to either advance what they believe in, and not just by holding conferences, but actually doing something or improving themselves in some way. Whereas we are a lot of writing angry letters to the editor. So that's been my concern. So that's why the two things we're talking about here, I think, fit very well into what I'm trying to do myself. Number one, that your conference is, well, what's the website for the conference?
Natalism.org.
Natalism.org. That you're not just saying, rah, 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 babies are great, let's go have some. You're talking about the practical nuts and bolts of what to do in this strange situation. Likewise with Exit. You could just sit around and talk about the Fed all day. And there's nothing wrong with talking about the Fed. But after a while, it's time to do something. You know, so that's what you guys are doing. You're actively doing something. Yes, we live in a really depressing political environment. That is true. And we face a lot of challenges. But that's all the more reason that we should actually do something to help ourselves and make our families more secure. In fact, I want to read something you wrote, Kevin, because it is on the new and improved tomwoods.com. I have a brand new homepage. Nobody knows it because I forgot to tell people, but now I'm telling them. I have a brand new homepage because mine was way out of date. It didn't have half the stuff that I'm up to right now. So I have a whole new homepage at tomwoods.com. And partway down, I have a quotation from our friend here, Kevin Dolan. And you wrote, "You can't own the libs if you don't own your income, your wealth, your personal security, your children's education. As long as these things come hand to mouth at the sufferance of people who hate you, you will live like a mistreated zoo animal, and any talk of political action will remain hallucinatory cope. Entrepreneurship, community building, and mutual aid is the path to sovereignty." Boom. Thank you for that, because that fit very nicely in a blank spot at tomwoods.com.
It's beautifully, it's wonderful to hear that in your voice.
Well, thank you. And it's nice to be able to express in my voice something so elegantly stated. All right, so now that we've complimented each other, let me say beyond that of course, you know, I'm doing something similar, and it's because I saw the good work that Exit was doing, and I thought, all right, well, I want that. So initially, my plan was, I'm going to call up Kevin Dolan, and I'm going to tell him the Exit group that you have, Exit, is going to merge with my School of Life program, and that's how it's going to be. And Kevin, you know, having some dignity and self-respect, did not immediately accept my proposal and said, well, how about this crazy idea? How about I keep my thing and you keep yours? But he works for me in the sense that, or no, I wouldn't say works for me. He is co-owner of my School of Life program, and he does the small group thing. Well, I want to read a little something, because again, all I talk about is depressing things. And I wouldn't say that's entirely true. 70% is depressing. And I hate that. I really wish it didn't have to be that way. So this is the 30%. And you know what they say, Kevin, that bad news seems to sell better than good news. Like, people want to tune in for the disaster and not the triumph. But I'm just rolling the dice here that my listeners are different, that they do want to hear about people succeeding in this ridiculous society we live in. So I got this email and I'm going to post it eventually, and I'll have the guy's name, but I haven't gotten his permission yet. So my School of Life, for example, has a fitness call where you show up and every week and you check in on how you're doing. And staying accountable to people helps you do better. It just flat out does. As you see in your Exit program that you have, staying accountable to other people who are in your similar situation and who see the world the way you do. You know, these are also people who look at the world the way you do. That helps you succeed, because you might be tempted, oh, well, maybe I won't be so good this week. But then you know you got to show up at that group and tell them, I did a bad job. You know, you don't want to tell them that. So here's what he says. So we're not just about business. We're not just about any one thing. We're about all the ingredients that go into making a healthy, wealthy, and wise person. So he says, The fitness call may have saved my life, but definitely added time to my day by just helping me get healthier mentally and physically. I've lost 50 pounds, went from a 40-inch to a 32-inch waist, went from pre-diabetic to no risk, and from a high heart attack risk to low. More importantly, my mindset is better, and that also comes out of the fitness call. This has been a very difficult year for me, and I have no doubt the person I was before the fitness call and the school of life in general would have handled it with junk food and alcohol, and I probably would have gained another 50 pounds. Instead, with a lot of help from the group, I shrug it off and keep going. Now, that's fantastic. So you see, that's way better than just writing a letter to the editor, because he actually did something. He actually leads, in a certain sense, a freer life because he's not bound by the shackles of the health he had before. Or this one came in just late last week. I could pick these at random. Just late. I haven't even had time to write to thank the guy. He's going to hear this before I've even thanked him. Somebody wrote to say, last week I had the breakthrough I was looking for when I joined School of Life in August 2023. I accepted an offer from a local company with a 33% pay increase, better benefits, and responsibilities that fit where I wanted to take my career. What helped was your accountability groups, especially Barbara Williams, who is one of our accountability group facilitators. And you, Kevin, helped me find her. And I appreciate that because she is an absolute gem.
Yeah,
on top of the one-on-one guidance, she made many introductions for me with other members of the school. That got me onto various projects that broadened my skill set. It also connected me to, and I don't know if I should mention names, such and such person with whom I was able to barter for her career coaching skills. These are the kinds of results I was looking for in a community. Before School of Life, I struggled through a lot of other premium skill and coaching programs. They only left me with a shiny object syndrome and a hole in my account the size of a small car. When I start my job in another week, I won't be struggling to put food on the table. I won't have to agonize over keeping my kids out of activities they work hard to excel at. And most importantly, I can get back to tithing. Thank you so much for putting this community together. I'm looking forward to the day we meet so I can thank you in person. That's what happens. You know, he just went. He just showed up again and again and got these results because we have in the community, we have so many talented people that if you need something, we'll hook you up with somebody who can help you. He needed career coaching. So he had somebody who was a career coach who wasn't a shyster. That's a very rare thing, Kevin.
Yeah. You can't write a better one. I mean, 40 to 32, that's crazy for one thing. And then I think the other story also illustrates that, like, again, like people often think that like being sovereign or being more independent means you like go eat roots and berries in the woods. And that's certainly not the case. It's also not the case that you need to like quit your job and go like start a tech startup to be more independent, more sovereign. You can just alter your relationship with your employer. You can find an employer with you know, whether it's remote work, whether it's reskilling so that you have more marketable skills and broader opportunities, and you can work in more locations from more locations so that you have more jurisdictional freedom. Like there's all kinds of, and it's just a question of like how far do you want to take it and what do you want to do and what resources do you need? But I mean, your group, it's scaled to the point where there's essentially no expertise, no resource that like, if somebody had the need, we couldn't connect them. Like,
right.
It's all there.
Right. Well, let me add one other thing. So by the way, you should join it. You should at least try it out for the 30 days for $1.
$1?
Yeah.
Shoot.
I mean, you could spend that $1 on some gum, or you could be part of like, you know, this is what we're doing now. Like, I don't really know how to put, this is a matter of, this is what we're doing. Like this is what the cool kids are up to right now. We're all doing this. So onebucktrial.com. And I haven't even scratched the surface of how it helps people, but that's just a little bit of an example. So of course, you know, I email the members to tell them about different things that we're doing. You know, we have sessions for the whole plenary membership on all different topics that, you know, you're going to need to know if you want to not get killed by the insane lunatics who run this regime. But the other day, for the first time, I sent to the mailing list a job opening, not for me, but for somebody I know from the mastermind group. And I know this guy really well. He's very ethical. He runs a great business. It's won numerous awards. It has an excellent reputation. And in that job description, I mean, you look at that job description, you say, I would be crazy not to take this job. Between the pay, the bonuses, the benefits, the work environment, he has like no turnover because it's a great work environment. He never required masks. He never required vaccines or anything like that. He was never part of that. And you don't have to worry about saying the wrong thing in front of him because that's all John says is the wrong thing.
Because he'll beat you to it.
He'll beat you to it. And I thought, my school of life people, I know there's going to be, I don't want to say what industry it is because then people will write to me. It's too late now. You should have been in the group, onebucktrial.com. Next one of these jobs that comes up, I'll mail the list about that one. But he would love to have somebody from the school life. That means that they both see the world the same way. They both see the kind of work they do the same way. And I just thought this would be a win for everybody. Because it's a win for John, because it's hard to find good help these days. It really is. Mm-hmm. And he could find somebody who's not only qualified, but who, also has the same worldview he has. So he doesn't have to worry about somebody, raising a ruckus in the office. But then you look at how nobody leaves this office because John is such a good employer. And there are so many features of it that just make you say, I have got to have this job. And more, I want to be saying to people in the community, look, if you are like John and you're looking to fill a high-level position, I have people who are self-selected in this group because it tends to be a higher, frankly, a higher level kind of person who's attracted to an offer like this. And I will put it in front of them, and you won't have to pay the $8 gazillion it takes you to hire a headhunter to find them. So that's another benefit. Like they just got in their inbox the best job offer I've ever seen. I mean, I'll tell you that right now. I've never seen a job better than this one. So I'm trying to do, what can I do with the connections that I have to help my community as much as possible? And the answer to that is not recording extra podcast episodes every week. That is not the answer. The answer is this school of life thing. So that's why I set up onebucktrial.com. That's fair. Try it out for $1. Go without gum for 1 week, and try it out.
Yeah, I think it's incredible. The group, the connections, and the ways that the people can't wait to get back together, can't wait to hear what's going on in each other's lives. They miss each other when they don't show up. Like it's a real community now, and it's wonderful to see.
And by the way, again, this makes us a little different from Exit. There is a women's group. If you think it's going to be all men. Now, the School of Life attracts more women than Woods is used to. Because you'll remember the old. You personally might not remember. The old joke was that when I did my first demographic survey back around 2016, the audience was 93% men. Mm-hmm. But that's because that goes with the territory, with the kind of ideology I'm associated with. It tends to be mostly men. But even so, that's seemed a little bit skewed. So in the old days, when I used to advertise for Harry's Razors before they completely lost their minds and I had to drop them, they were getting like 2 for 1, like they were getting double their money's worth because they normally pay for ads on just ordinary podcasts, but they're advertising on a show that's like all men. So it was great for them. They stayed with me forever. I was the one who gave them the boot. So that was the number we had. And then on the eve of the 2000th episode in 2021, we did one more survey. And I think COVID brought in a lot of moms who were frustrated about what was going on with their kids, with all the restrictions. And we were up, Kevin, I am delighted to tell you, we had doubled it. We were at 14%. So heaven only knows where that number is today, but we do have a women's group in our school life filled with absolutely wonderful, really knowledgeable, smart, fun, decent people. So
and Jenny Lynn runs that call. She's terrific. So,
she absolutely is. Like if I had 20 Jenny Lynns, I'd be able to change the world single-handedly. I wouldn't need anybody else. That would do it. But that's okay. We're going to do the most we can with the one Jenny Lynn that we have. All right, Kevin, let's leave with a parting note. Next week is the election, and I'm going to be doing one episode that will be released next week following the election, but the other 2 episodes will have been recorded before the election. So this is one of those. So I'm not going to ask you to predict the future or anything like that.
Yeah.
But my point is that next week, I don't know if it's good news, bad news, really bad news, or what kind of news is coming. So what can you say to people that, isn't like Pollyanna, but that might give them legitimate hope?
Okay, so here's what I'd say. If Trump wins and we make America great again, you're going to be glad that you got together and organized with like-minded people. If it's Kamala and it's 1,000 years of liberal darkness, you're going to be glad that you organized with people and got together. And if it's Mad Max and it's the apocalypse and it's nuclear war, you're going to be glad that you organized with like-minded people and got together. It's the same. The benefit of connecting with like-minded people and building things together. I would basically say, I don't want to get too far afield, but it's basically what makes humans adaptive in every sort of circumstance, every part of the world, every climate region. It's our ability to solve problems, and it's our ability to communicate and organize. And so regardless of what the future holds, you got to be doing that, and it works. The people, I've made a study in my own life of circumstances in which people were suddenly thrust out of their ordinary circumstances, whether that's like the Russian collapse or the Yugoslav collapse or World War II or the Soviet Union, all kinds of the sort of upheavals and changes of the 20th century. The people who did best were not the people who were complacent. And it also, interestingly, it generally wasn't the people who bugged out and ran and hid. It was the people who were the most connected, the people who were most dynamic, the people who were the most liquid and mobile and problem solving and, helping people get from A to B and find what they needed. And so I would say that regardless of what happens, that's the kind of person you want to be. And volatility is always opportunity. Volatility is always opportunity. There's a buyer and seller for every transaction. I can put it that way. You can always be in a position to thrive.
That is an excellent note on which to end. So the links will be up at tomwoods.com/2564. But just to run down here, natalism.org for the conference, exitgroup.us for Kevin's group, and onebucktrial.com for my free trial over at the School of Life. Well, thank you, Kevin, for your efforts. I'm telling you, it was so meeting you has been so significant for me in my life, and as it turns out, in turn for so many other people. So I'll just say it's a wonderful happenstance that our paths crossed. So thank you very much.
Totally agree. Thank you so much, Tom. It's wonderful to be here.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.